Election fraud claims dominated Georgia's first GOP gubernatorial debate Sunday night. Governor Brian Kemp and former Senator David Perdue clashed over the results of the 2020 election. They both blamed each other for Democratic gains in the last cycle.
Before he's certified, he owed the people of Georgia a full and thorough investigation. And yet to date, he still hasn't done that. And he's lied to the Georgia people about, oh, he doesn't have the constitutional authority to call a special session. He just called a special session last year for redistricting.
Well, first of all, the only one lying here is you. And that is a fact.
Did you call a special? Did you call a special session? Did you stop the consent decree, Governor?
I didn't have anything to do with the consent decree.
Of course you didn't. That's why you failed. You should have stopped.
You were on the primary ballot after the consent decree was signed. You never said a word about it until you lost the election.
Of course I did.
When we were riding on the bus, Governor, when I was campaigning for you in the runoff,
you did not stop
when I was campaigning for you in the runoff, did you ever ask me about having a special session?
Of course I did.
No,
you lied about it. And you lied about it, and it was even proven by Greg Bluestein's own book.
How many times was, I don't care about some reporter's book. I care about the truth.
Well, I care about the truth
too, and
you're lying
Did you
right
ever ask me the many times I was on the bus campaigning for you?
In front of
who are the witnesses? You bring them forward, just like this.
Your staff, my staff, and Kelly Loeffler's staff in Truist Park. Absolutely, we asked for a special session. You continue to lie about that.
David Perdue, who is backed by former President Trump, lost the 2021 Senate runoff election to Jon Ossoff. Georgia's primary election is less than a month away, and counties can begin mailing in absentee ballots starting today. CBS News political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns is with me now. Hey, Caitlin, former Senator Perdue immediately, pretty quickly attacked Governor Kemp for failing to overturn the 2020 election. Reminds us of former President Trump's efforts to do that in Georgia. How may have it impacted the race or former Senator Perdue?
Hey, Scott. Well, that was a pretty stunning moment that you just played, but the even more significant moment happened at the very beginning of the debate when former Senator Perdue looked at the camera and said that the election was stolen and it was rigged, echoing the false claims from former President Trump. You know, Georgia, of course, was kind of ground zero for the fight over democracy in the last election. There were multiple audits and assessments, including a hand recount of the votes. And remember that phone call that former President Trump placed to Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, a Republican who came under the ire of President Trump for doing his job. Remember, he asked him in that phone call to find the votes to overturn the election in favor of Donald Trump. Biden won the election in Georgia by a little over 11,000 votes, and that was a state that really helped him to win the votes necessary to become president. And we've seen a year and a half later that Republicans trying to gain traction in the state or curry favor with the former president are still making these false claims about the election. Now, the big question is, will it pay off in this Georgia primary? Right now, incumbent Governor Brian Kemp is leading in the polls. Perdue, the only reason he is really in this race, he was pretty much drafted by former President Trump to get into this race because Trump has a pretty big vendetta against Kemp for just certifying the election results in his state. That is really the basis for Perdue's run here. If Kemp is successful, that will be welcome news to a lot of Republicans who want to put the 2020 election behind them and move on and focus on things like the economy and inflation.
It will be interesting to see if other Senate or other congressional Republican primary debates become about 2020 and the election, and whether this is a canary in the coal mine. I want to mention something else, though, that came up. We saw the former senator invoking the name of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis quite a bit. In fact, he mentioned Governor DeSantis almost as often, if not more often, than he mentioned former President Trump. What does that suggest to you?
Yeah, there was an interesting moment in the debate where, Kemp has been touting his record in terms of handling the pandemic. Perdue said that he gave Kemp a C and gave DeSantis an A. And the idea that DeSantis's name is coming up in a Georgia gubernatorial primary, DeSantis is up for re-election, by the way, in Florida, kind of shows the way in which DeSantis has become this kind of, hero among Republicans in terms of his style. He's really really, echoed Donald Trump in terms of his style. He's going after Disney, which could have a bad impact for Florida taxpayers. So that's kind of interesting to see whether DeSantis is becoming somewhat of a model for Republican candidates. We know DeSantis is likely to have bigger ambitions, perhaps beyond the Florida governorship, or is thought to at least have bigger ambitions, is thought to be a 2024 contender. So whether he's becoming kind of a national figure, this gives a little bit of an indication.
So people outside of these campaigns, I think, would agree consistently that Governor Kemp has a pretty conservative record. Yet we watched this debate last night, and we saw the former senator attack the governor's record on COVID, on education, on immigration. How is he putting the foundation in place for those accusations?
That's right. Well, Governor Kemp wants to campaign on the economy. He's been running ads talking about the way in which he, in his words, led the reopening of Georgia after the pandemic. He's been really trying to draw contrast with Democrat Stacey Abrams, who, whoever emerges as the winner of this Republican primary will face in the fall. And Georgia, as we know, is a state that's changing demographically. President Biden won it in 2020. It's become a big, key battleground state. Governor Kemp has wanted to kind of focus on a lot of these issues that we're seeing across the country in terms of the economy, inflation, domestic issues. He's been talking about his expansion of the tax credit for gasoline. Those are the kinds of issues. There's really not a lot of daylight here in terms of policy on the Republican side in this primary. Again, it's really Perdue running on these election fraud claims and trying to go after Kemp in this regard. So that's also interesting to note about your point, how this is playing in other races. Not a lot of contrasts on policy. It's really focused on the election.
We're already in debate season. Where did the time go? Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Scott.